Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and Calls from the Brighter Futures is available now on Amazon. And Volume 2 is going to be available on Amazon as well. Check out the links in the description down below, because they're from the authors of tonight's story. It started somewhere west of here across the lake. A buddy of mine, Leon, said it spread across 3 barracks faster than wildfire. 2 days later, Leon stopped telling me what was happening because 2 days later, Leon was dead. His body nothing but worm food. Ranger Vincent didn't seem too concerned. He told us that the Central Service Office was taking precautions. That's why a lot of us were reminded over and over to get our immunizations, people. He chuckled as he walked past me. His demeanor was meant to signify that everything was fine, but it wasn't. I could sense it. So could the rest of our barracks. We should just leave. Call up the head ranger, order a charter flight back home, Cassidy whined. We should. We probably can't. I've been on situations like this before, and something tells me that they aren't telling us everything. The whole vacation seems set up from the get-go. Like, did I ever tell you that I was practically held hostage back in Paradise Branch? I said as I stuffed a sandwich down my throat. It tasted dry. Food hadn't really tasted the same since I left Paradise. It was really starting to bother me. Truth be told, nothing had felt the same since then. Back in Paradise, at least there were consistencies. And here, in a place that was meant to represent the real thing, chaos seemed to reign supreme. Anytime I went anywhere amid the barracks, gossip spread of bad things happening. And bad things were getting worse and worse every day. What is all of this? Why is all this happening? I asked again and again, hoping someone would know. I know why, Scott McDougal said one night as we gathered around a campfire to roast weenies. The sky was so dark, one would think that you could see every star in heaven. But instead, it was blank as if God was waiting to fill it all in. Why's that? Ranger Vincent said as he joined us by the bonfire. Before I came, I was in contact with him. Well, I guess he wasn't a friend, nor any acquaintance, more like a benefactor, really. He gave me and 3 others from Serenity Falls a golden ticket to come up here. Anyway, told me to bring something along. Scott paused and took off his pack before tossing it down in front of the circle. He unzipped it and took out what appeared to be a simple white box. It looked like there was a bit of tree moss on the underbelly. And I asked him, "What's in the box?" "Don't know. Can't seem to open it." He told me that someone here in Eden would know how. I've been holding on to it, thinking that people would come forward, but they never have. "What is it? Like fingerprint encrypted?" a weak voice said from the edge of the fire. I didn't recognize the face. A scrawny tall kid who was wearing a yellow windbreaker and a red-skin ball cap. "Seems to be. You familiar with it?" Scott asked, passing in the box. For some reason, as he did so, Vincent's face was uneasy. The sky felt darker than before. "Yeah, I've handled them most of my career. Comes with the territory. I bet I could figure out the encryption," he said. Before the conversation could continue, storm clouds loomed. Bolts of lightning struck the edge of the lake nearby, and Vincent told us all to get into our cabins. I managed to follow behind the scrawny kid, and Scott. Once in, with the door bolted shut, I turned my attention back towards the case. "You a hacker or something?" asked the kid. "Forensic analysis. It's funny. This looks exactly like the one I saw in Florida." He trailed off and began to examine it with more detail. "Could it be?" he remarked, pressing his thumb against it and waiting. Suddenly, a bright light emanated from the center of the box. An image of a man appeared. "Maddox Delaney, you and I don't know each other, but we soon will. The place you're standing on is both holy and cursed, and you need to leave. But before you can, there's something you must do." Before I could finish listening, I heard a crashing noise from outside. I peeked out the cabin window and saw what looked like a a smog coming across the lake amid the lightning. As I watched, I realized it was more like a plague of locusts. A swarm of deadly insects spreading their disease wherever they went. Vincent pushed past me to escape, dashing into the woods. "Hey, you can't just leave us!" I heard Maddox shout. I don't know why, but I ran too. I felt that staying would be worse. Others did the same. We moved towards the trees, away from the camp. I heard cries of anguish as the locusts began to eat up everything in sight. I wondered if Maddox and the others had survived. Everything is fine, my ass. Everything is not fine. The whole camp's become ground zero for the apocalypse, or at least that's what it feels like, the man next to me muttered as he hunkered down. Suddenly a small monkey chittered next to him, then skidded up his leg as he hid. I didn't recognize him, and I wondered if he had traveled here alongside Maddox. There must be something we can do, I insisted. Maybe so. I heard there's a central station up in the mountains. I bet they have a way for us to contact someone up there, he remarked as he pet the monkey. I don't know the way, I admitted. Nor do I, but it beats staying here, he told me. He extended his burly hand and we shook as introductions were made. Mo, nice to meet you. Charlie, I told him. Then his monkey chatted. Oh, that's Atlas, he chuckled. Nice to meet you as well, Atlas, I said dryly. Then we moved towards the hiking trails. For a few minutes, neither of us said a word. The buzzing of insects could still be heard amid the trees, and there were people shouting and fleeing, trying to find cover. We paused to take a drink from Mo's canteen, and I remarked, I don't know if I can go much longer. How far is the station? Probably another good 5 or 6 miles. It's all uphill, friend, he answered. I opened my mouth to respond when both of us heard the strangest sound emerge from the trees. It sounded like a cackle. The type a witch would have after boiling children alive. And I saw some of the trees nearby beginning to rot, and the ground blacken. Someone was here. She wore a ragged outfit that looked like it had been sold at Hot Topic 10 years ago. It smelled of putrid decay. Her skin was pasty white, covered in tattoos, and her teeth were yellow and black. Her hair seemed to be covered in spiders, and her face cracked with pus and warts festering. Beneath her toes I saw crawling worms, shaking towards Mo and I as she laughed again. Atlas screeched in fear. Peggy Pestilence just wants to be friends, the diseased-riddled woman said. I balked and started to run, but the ground seemed to be shifting around me. Poisonous vines shot up to block our way, and Mo and I were trapped. I'm sorry, my friend, he said, as he looked towards the heavens and then proceeded to say a solemn prayer. It sounded like it was Latin, or maybe some other ancient language like Hebrew. All I knew was that I wanted to do the same, just to make my peace with God before I died. Peggy moved closer, the rotten decay from her body touching everything close to her. Atlas clung to Mo's arm with all his strength, too frightened to move. Then, just as she was about 30 meters away, a smoke bomb drifted into the forested area and covered the entire area with fog. I felt a hand grab me and we were on the move. I did my best to follow their pace as I covered my eyes and coughed profusely. Eventually we hid in one of the mountainous alcoves as I caught my breath and nodded in thanks to our rescuer. The figure was dressed in what looked like a ninja outfit, but didn't say a word. He held a finger to cover his mouth. And we remained quiet as Peggy passed by, still searching for other victims. As the forest became still again, the stranger pulled his mask down and nodded towards both of us. Sorry for the antics. I doubt it would be long before she comes back. We need to move, he said. I didn't argue. I just followed as Mo began to speak to the newcomer in some strange dialect. Atlas and I listened intently, but it was like gibberish to me. I wondered if Atlas was faring any better. I understood enough to gather that the two knew each other, and the stranger was surprised that Mo was here. We traveled a great distance to the south. I didn't rightly know where we wound up, but it seemed more remote than anywhere else we'd been to. Finally, we pushed through a threshold of bushes, and I saw a large crowd dressed similarly to the man that had rescued me. These are the ones I found so far, but even such an army won't mean much if we can't find Delaney, the stranger stated with a solemn tone. My ears picked up. That name sounds familiar. I just met someone with that name back in my barracks, I offered. The man came over to me and shook my shoulder. Where was this at? I don't know. Somewhere by the lake. I'm sure that plague probably got to him too, I remarked. Not likely, he said dryly. Harper, I can get us to the barracks tonight. For now, we need to discuss the merits of this plan, Mo said, guiding his companion over to a campfire to talk. Atlas followed me to stay warm. I sat down at another bonfire where a group of people were warming their hands and trying not to look afraid. Cute date, the woman named Patty said as the monkey cuddled close to my neck. Then sneezed, and suddenly the entire group was in a panic, immediately getting away from her. Get her to quarantine, I heard Harper shout. Things happened in a flash. Several of the figures grabbed Patty by the arms and started to drag her towards what looked like a makeshift cage. Atlas began to shriek excitedly. No, wait, it's just allergies. I'm not contagious. Someone get Bailey, she shouted. I felt sorry for them, but I understood their paranoia. There was no telling how much of a scourge Peggy had unleashed. It was best to be cautious. What's going to happen to her? I asked worriedly, as I shushed Atlas to calm down. He seemed to do so under my stern hand. Don't worry about that, friend. You should be thankful that you're alive, a woman next to me said as she scooted closer. Same thing could happen to us, I pointed out, as I heard the cage slam shut and Peggy's muffled screams disappeared amid the evening air. No, I trust Patrick. I mean Harper, she said, blushing a little. Wait, Patrick, as in Patrick Colton? I knew him back in Serenity Falls, I muttered as I glanced back across the fire towards the man who had saved my life. I knew he'd look familiar. Please, you can't say anything. He isn't even supposed to be here, but he said that he knew that being sent here was dangerous, so he's been helping most of us survive while hiding from those things, she said. That's a lot to take in. Not even sure where to start asking questions. I guess we should start with names? I'm Charlie. Elise, she said with a giggle and remarked, Anyway, at first I thought Harper was just one of those conspiracy nuts, but I've seen this shit firsthand, like that bug lady. A nutritionist in my old bunker was making me eat human tacos, she said. I gave her an odd look, but before our conversation could continue, the disguised Colton and Mo returned. We're ready to go back and find Maddock, Charlie. Are you coming? He said. Atlas leapt from my shoulder and back to his original owner, as I nodded, telling Elise to stay safe, and following them back into the woods. We put on protective masks before we left. Mo explained that it would help us breathe easy as we traveled. By now it was dark and quiet. The woods seemed dead, not a spot untouched by the swarms that Peggy had sent. The ground was muddy, uneven, like it had been trampled by a horse. And when we got to the bunker, it really looked like we were too late. Most of the campers were dead, or were on death's doorstep with every affliction from leprosy to melting skin. They crawled towards us, desperate for aid. Mo had to keep his pet from overreacting as we drew close to the site where I had encountered Maddock. And we saw that the door was still blocked. Maybe he had wisely kept himself away from the sick to last a little bit longer. Colton slammed his fist on the door roughly. Who is it? A voice said from within. Delaney, it's me. I understand you received Chance's package, he said. There was no response. Then finally Colton added, I have a gas mask. Open the door and I can give it to you so you can breathe the air. Slowly, the door crept open and Maddock's hand shot out to grab the mask. Then, from the edge of the bunker, I heard the eerie cackle again. Peggy Pestilence had come to finish us off. We need to get out of here now, Mo insisted. Atlas shrieked excitedly as Peggy moved closer. Maddock appeared at the door with a mask over his face as he passed the white box back over to Colton and remarked, I watched the recording. Then you know that if we want to live, we have to move, and we have to do it now, Colton answered back. Peggy just stood there, putrid acidic sludge dripping from her fingertips as we searched for an exit. Then Mo whispered an order to Atlas, and the monkey sprung in action. It flew across the campsite and grabbed a hold of Peggy's face and started scratching at her eyes. The fiend snarled back, gripping at the tiny animal and dangling him up like a chew toy. Peggy doesn't like when people play rough. I almost could sense that there was a little bit of worry in her as we crawled away. "But I have friends too," Peggy giggled as she slapped Atlas away. He fled into the woods. Mo stood up and tried to call out to him when a ricochet bullet slammed through his spine. "Jesus Christ!" I screamed. Colton frowned and ordered Maddox and I to help him get to safety. Peggy cackled as we ran, but I knew that Mo could not get far. "Leave him," Colton ordered. I looked at him, flabbergasted at such a statement. There was no way I could do that. He raised the white box up and remarked, "We have everything we need now to find a way out of here. We can escape." "We can't. Not until we get to the central station. Mr. Hart has the gate access codes," Maddox said. Colton nearly fainted. A little disappointed his attempt at being a runaway hadn't gone as planned, and then he said, "Fine. We get back to camp and we rally everyone to march up to the mountain. We storm the bunker and get Mr. Hart to let us out." I shook my head as Mo collapsed, wheezing and gasping for air. "No, you can't do that. If I'm right about what it is, everything will be torn apart," Mo said, gesturing towards the tape. "Exactly. It's time to undo all this damage," Colton said, and then looked towards me. "Are you coming, Charlie?" I shook my head. "I can't leave him." The two men seemed to think that I was sealing my own fate, but I didn't care. The disease Peggy was spreading was one thing, but their own choice of being revolutionists seemed worse in my eyes. Soon, Mo and I were alone in the woods. I heard footsteps, and the smell was enough to convince me that it was Peggy. But this time she wasn't alone. A red-headed man wearing a business suit came into the canopy with a sniper rifle and a sneer towards Mo. "Not much of a fight. I want to see some real action," he muttered. Peggy snickered as worms and maggots crawled their way out of her pores and towards me. "Sometimes it's fun to see the weak ones die slowly," she whispered. I closed my eyes, ready to accept death. Then from the tree line, Atlas struck again, grabbing the redhead's badge and scratching it at the bulging muscles. "What the fuck, you cheeky little bastard," the man said, as he grabbed his gun and rushed off into the darkened forest to find the monkey. I used my furry friend as a distraction and tossed a handful of mud into Peggy's face. Despite my wanting to save Mo, I knew now it would be impossible to do so. So I fled. And as I ran, I had a jolt of adrenaline hit my body. My mind raced as I thought of where to go. Patrick's plan of escape had some merit, even if it seemed like it would wind up killing us all, so eventually I made my way to his enclosure where the last of the group was finally gathering supplies to head for the mountains. "Charlie, I thought we lost you back there," Elise said worriedly as she checked me for injuries. Somehow I had survived. For how much longer, I couldn't be sure. I looked towards Maddox and Colton. Both of them shared a silent story, telling me to say nothing of what I saw. But I didn't plan to. "I'm fine, just lagging behind," I said as we started to leave. Then I heard the rattling of a cage, and I looked over to see that Patty was still locked away. "Wait, are we not letting her go with us?" I asked. "Too dangerous. Whatever this sickness is, we already lost an entire 20 good men and women. I don't want to lose more," Colton said as he covered his face. His eyes were daring me to disobey him so that he could make an order for me to be locked up alongside her and left as bait for the monsters. "You're right, of course. You should be happy to still have our health," I said grimly. I didn't look back as we left towards the hiking trails again. All I heard was the shriek of Patty drifting into the night sky and intoxicating the land with her own words of plagues. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video or listening to tonight's story on the podcast if you're listening on the podcast. If you're not listening on the podcast, then you can always find the podcast on Spotify, on Google, and on iTunes. And if you are not watching on YouTube, then hey, you should probably check out the MrCreepyPasta Storytime YouTube. It's on YouTube. Especially, I wanted to give a big thank you to Jordan Alexander Sanchez. Mr. Thud, Ken Lando Higuchi, Chompski, Bobby Karman, Nico Kaeo, Tristain Pelton, Chase Burnett, Deanna Kraus, King Hades F13, Unknown Nobody, Joshua Mcmeekin, Michael Scharbrough, Kazan, ThisIsMyRealNameNoShit, Jason V.B. Wilson, InfernalOne, Lilwulfgaming, JimboTheHutt, Caspian, Jordan Nells, Hades' nephew, Jordan Wayne Deckard, Randy Leipe, Ann Sharon, Acid System, Mike Bullock, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Brian Ark, Cryptic Nightmares, Shadow Morningstar, Someone You Love, S-Man, Kieran the Sloth, Thomas Burgett, Liam Newman, Sky Harbor, Caleb Dougal, Nina Smith, Rafael Rodriguez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Storm Crow, Daniel Polson, and Corey X. Kenshin. Thank you guys so much for being supporters on Patreon. You guys are seriously the MVPs, as well as everybody who's listed down there in the description down below. I hope all of you have enjoyed the stories with me, and sweet dreams.